Hello, gang. Tattooed Biker here with you, and tonight I've got some wild and shocking real reports containing viewers' true stories, encountering creatures that simply aren't supposed to exist. But people continue to see them everywhere, and often. In this video, you'll hear true stories of Bigfoot sightings, strange winged humanoid creatures, and more. So if you enjoy this type of content, stalk that like button, subscribe if you haven't already, then grab your gear because it's time to ride to Cryptid Country. This first email details what happened when a couple of friends encountered a bat-winged humanoid in the outskirts of Hamilton, Montana. Both witnesses described seeing the same creature. But what was this thing? Where did it come from?
Hey Biker, this account took place in 2010. I was living in Hamilton, Montana with my current girlfriend. It was late at night and my friend and I would always go for a drive. We parked at an empty parking lot outside of a gym that was on the outskirts of town. My friend had his medical marijuana card and he would smoke while we talked about random stuff. We worked together, and workplace drama was usually the discussion. After we were done hanging out, I started my car to head back into town. We started heading toward the outlet to take a right out onto Main Street. I was about 50 feet away from the outlet when I decided the mood called for some loud music. To give you an idea as to what our field of view was, the outlet had two white fences on each side that spanned the property. It was one of those fences that had two logs with spaces in between them, so vision was partially blocked on the right and left side. And granted, it was also pretty damn dark. That's when the shit hit the fan. Out of the corner of my eye, I see what appeared to be a dusty brown ball of plastic or garbage that rolled into view from the other side of the right fence. We were driving closer as this was happening, but as soon as I got a better look, I knew that this wasn't a piece of garbage in the wind. I immediately realized that it was a winged, flesh-like creature and appeared to have crash-landed during flight. I thought my eyes were deceiving me, and I immediately turned to my friend, who let out one of the most blood-curdling screams I've ever heard in my entire life. I kept looking at him and looking back to this thing. My friend was so scared that he flew his legs up into the air, up against the passenger window and windshield, as if that would shield him from this creature that we were approaching. I kept repeating, "What is that? What is that?" As soon as the creature came to its senses, it planted its feet and took off flying in the opposite direction of my car. At that point, I stopped the car and all I remember is heavy breathing from both my friend and I, from the adrenaline as we watched the silhouette of this thing fly away into the distance. The wingspan on this monster was at least 8 to 10 feet wide. It seemed to have webbing like a bat, no feathers. We watched until it wasn't visible. It took a good while. Montana still has a decent amount of light pollution, and we could see the contrast of this creature in the sky for 2 to 3 minutes before it disappeared. I remember my friend telling me, "Please, just take me home." So we took off and headed back into town. And I just kept asking, what was that? I don't think there were more than a few words spoken between us at that point. And I just kept asking, what was that? He would respond only with, "I just don't know, man." I finally dropped him off and I went home and told my girlfriend, who was laughing at how animated and serious I was, while telling her what had happened to us. The next day, I woke up and immediately called him, and I asked him, "What did you see?" I wanted him to tell me first so that what I had to say didn't influence him in his recollection of this creature. He told me it was a flesh-like creature. It wasn't a bird. There weren't any feathers. So I asked him what color was it, and he told me that it was brownish. And I said, "Sort of gray?" And he said, "Oh my God, yes." I no longer talked to this friend as He slipped into an unfortunate issue with prescription pills. I wished that we still had a friendship, as I've wanted to talk to him about this since it happened. We both saw the exact same thing. I'm the type of person to laugh in the face of ghost or paranormal stuff. If I didn't see it, then I just don't believe it. I still, to this day, can't explain what I saw. And I still get chills when I think about my friend's scream. The way I describe this thing is a gigantic bat humanoid with wings. There wasn't one feather on this flying creature. I mention this because anyone I tell this story to always tells me that it was a bird of some sort. My theory as to why it was rolling around on the ground as if it crash landed out of the sky, well, I think my subwoofer sound system might have messed with its navigation. And that's another reason that I feel like it might have been a gigantic bat. Can you help explain what I might have seen? Has anyone out there ever had a similar experience with gigantic bat-like creatures? It also might be worth mentioning that Rocky Mountain Labs is in Hamilton, Montana. This is one of the highest security laboratories in the world. My old boss's ex-husband works there, and the only thing she knew about this job was that he took care of the animals. The deadliest diseases are held in this lab, and I know that there's monkeys and other animals there that are used for testing. Thanks for reading my email. Signed, Shane.
Next, a child wakes up at 3 a.m. to the feeling of being watched. Feeling extremely uneasy, they roll over to look around the room and see something standing beside their mother.
Dear Biker, my house has always been kind of creepy. Growing up, I've had unexplained experiences starting from the time I was 4, never stopping. I live in rural Kentucky, one of those towns that solely ran on coal and is 5 years behind the rest of the world. In general, the whole town is still covered in thick woods that appear to have not been tampered with in hundreds of years. My house is placed right in the middle of the mountains, surrounded by an extreme amount of woods and even a couple of ponds. That gives you the setting for my home. This is where the real story begins. Growing up, I was never allowed to watch shows like Ghost Hunters or even movies like The Exorcist in my house because of the weird activity that goes on there. I'd experienced it from an extremely young age, and my mom, who's lived in this house her whole life, had also. However, one night, my family made an exception and, well, we all watched a documentary about Waverly Hills together. At that age, I still slept in the room with my mom, due to me being afraid of sleeping in this house. That particular night, I woke up at 3 a.m. to the feeling of something watching me. I felt extremely uneasy. I rolled over to look around the room and my eyes locked onto something standing beside my mom. It was extremely tall, but looked like it had a broken back and couldn't stand up completely. It was slouched over and had extremely pale skin and bones sticking out under the skin everywhere due to how skinny this thing was. It had long claws hanging from both hands. Its face was sunken in and its eyes were completely black. A few greasy hairs were visible on its head. It had no clothes or private parts. I was completely horrified. I rolled over and covered myself up, head to toe, with the covers. I refused to move or even look out the rest of the night, even though I was fully awake. Eventually, my mom finally woke up that morning. She immediately started complaining of her side hurting. She raised her shirt to look and found huge claw marks down her side. It was 3 deep wounds that were extremely inflamed and bleeding. I felt horrible knowing that that thing had done that to her while I lay beside her hidden. A few months later, I saw the creature again, although not as horrible as the first experience. I woke up to the creature slouched on the floor at my side of the bed. It was watching me sleep. I covered myself up again immediately, but this time I got the courage to peek out and found it still looking at me. I'm not sure when it finally went away because I didn't dare look again. I got chills and my hair stood on end before even seeing it the first time. It had this feeling of complete evil about it. I'm 18 now, and obviously sleep in my own room. However, I still live in the same house. My mom still sleeps in the room where I witnessed this creature. Almost nightly, she has nightmares about something watching her. She has nightmares about something hiding in the paintings on her walls, or something coming down from the ceiling in her room while she's asleep. There's one specific corner of the room where almost every dream seems to originate. Our cats refuse to stay in that room if the door is shut. If anyone out there has any information about any folklore that could relate, please tell me. I'm desperate for any information about what I've seen. I've had countless other experiences in this house, but those are the major ones. Signed, Pete.
The description of the being is similar to that of a crawler humanoid. Some people, well, they think that these beings are thought forms or servitors, similar to the Slender Man meme, while others believe it to be a demonic entity. I've seen similar reports over the years, and it's not uncommon for these things to initiate physical harm. Now, on to our next email, in which tells the terrifying true story of a Rock County, Wisconsin man who, while driving home at 4 a.m., is suddenly face to face with a Bigfoot standing in the roadway in front of him. I've got a feeling that this is an encounter that he'll never forget.
Hello, biker. Thanks for reading my story. I live near the town of Union, Wisconsin, in Rock County. Early one morning last December 2023, I was driving home from work at around 4 a.m. The roads were deserted. The only sound I could hear was the hum of my car engine. It was a long and tiring day, and all I wanted was to get home and crawl into bed. As I turned a corner on the North Union Road, coming off of Route 59, my tired eyes widened in disbelief. Because there, standing in the middle of the road, was a massive, hairy bipedal creature that I estimate was over 8 feet tall. As my headlights illuminated its face, I realized it was no ordinary animal. Its eyes glowed in the darkness, reflecting the light from my car. Its long arms hung down by its side, and its massive chest heaved with each breath. That's when I knew instantly that, well, this was no ordinary creature. As I drew closer, I could see its face more clearly. It had a very human-like quality to it, with a wide, flat nose and a heavy brow. Its mouth opened slightly, revealing rows of teeth with pointy canines. The hair was dark, almost black. My heart pounded in my chest as I realized that I was face to face with a Bigfoot. I never believed I would ever actually encounter one. I slammed on the brakes and my car skidded to a halt just a few feet away from this creature. For a moment, I felt a surge of fear unlike anything I'd ever experienced. Then, without warning, the creature turned and ran into the woods to my right, disappearing into the darkness. I just sat there in shock, trying to process what I'd just seen. Was I hallucinating from exhaustion? I'm sure that this was real. But as I looked around, I saw the marks of its massive, wet footprints on the road surface, confirming that I had indeed encountered the beast. These wet prints were about 17 inches long and 8 inches wide at the widest point. There were 4 toes on both feet. To this very day, I can still feel the chill of that encounter, knowing that I came face to face with a creature that has long been the subject of myth and legend. It was a night that I'll never forget, and one that has left me with more questions than answers. Signed, Levi.
And finally, in this last email, a man tells of an experience he had while he was driving with his cousin, and a strange, well, wrong-looking deer appeared on the roadway. He writes,
Dear TB, This occurred in July of 2021, around 2 or 3 in the morning, but I remember it like it was just yesterday. I've always believed in the paranormal, and I've had a few experiences over the years. What sets this one apart, though, is the fact that it was also witnessed by another person who was a non-believer before this experience. We were driving along Highway 212 in a rural area, somewhere between Bella Forte, South Dakota, and Hammond, Montana. We were going to a music festival in northwestern Montana from Kentucky. My cousin was driving, and I was in the passenger seat. 2 others were in the back, and we'd been taking shifts driving, so that we didn't have to stay at a hotel and could drive straight through. My cousin and I were on night shift, due to the nature of our profession, which kept us awake at odd hours. We had been passing the time by BSing, listening to music, and looking at the local wildlife as we drove through. We had seen a lot of pronghorns and nice deer earlier in the day. Both of us, being outdoorsmen, we were pointing out every game animal that we caught the faintest glimpse of. We were on a particularly barren stretch of road and hadn't seen a man-made light for miles. No other cars on the road, no houses, nothing. We were reveling in the novelty of it, as we didn't have stuff like this back home. I was the first one to point out the deer that was just coming into view with the headlights. As we approached, there was clearly something off about this animal. My cousin says, "Man, that sure is a weird-looking deer." The animal was turned broadside to us, standing on the right side of the road, facing the highway. It had its nose to the ground like it was foraging. The coat was an odd, grayish-white, which was odd as deer tend to stay more red throughout the summer. There was obviously flesh hanging from the antlers. This was odd because the antlers were fully formed. Deer in July should still be in velvet, which means their antlers are still growing. They were also light-colored, no sign that they had been recently rubbed. As we got closer, I could start to see that there were patches of fur missing, not mange. And there were open sores, like really open wounds, ranging from tennis ball to dinner plate sized. The bones of the deer were also visible right through the skin. It looked like the embodiment of the term that paleontologists used, called shrink wrapping. And that's about the time that I noticed how disproportionate it was. The front legs were far too short, the back legs were too long, and the knees bent out to the sides, not backwards. The spine was twisted and stuck up in random intervals down the length of its back, and the neck was much, much too long to be on a buck. And then there was the snout. It wasn't built like a usual one. It was stocky, rigid, and very angular. It almost looked predatory. It was as if you had taken a deer skin and stretched it out over a wolf skull. And as the front tire became even with the deer's head, it looked up at us. It had really strange eyes. I don't know exactly how to explain them. They were a deep brown, almost red. They were clouded but hollow. Its tongue hung out from the side of its half-open mouth. There were visible, pointed teeth. But they were like canine. Deer don't even have top teeth in the front, but this one did. It looked like someone had grabbed a random handful of teeth from a jar and just glued them into this thing. Not deer teeth, but a jar full of teeth from random animals. It's almost like time slowed down, and I could feel my heart beat in my ears. My hands and ears got hot, and I gripped the door panel. I did this as it locked eyes with me. I've never been so sure that I was going to die in my entire life as I was in that moment. It maintained eye contact with me and followed me as we passed. My cousin said, in a manner of concern that I've never heard from him, "Did you see that?" To which I could only reply, "Yep." And he said, "Are we going to talk about it?" And I just said no. So we just sat in silence. The air between us was thick, and I could hear him breathing heavily, over the other two who were snoring in the back. He was gripping the steering wheel tightly with both hands. I turned the radio up and we just sat there. We went until the next streetlight before we said a single word to each other. And then we agreed not to discuss it until we were back from our trip. We took an alternate route home to see some things that we couldn't hit on the way up there, but I had this feeling that neither of us wanted to go back that way. We've talked about it a few times since then. Some people don't believe me when I tell them. Most people, though, can tell that I'm not making it up. I don't look for opportunities to talk about it. If the conversation is right, though, I'm more than willing to share. I get knots in my stomach thinking about it sometimes. I know what chronic wasting disease looks like. I know what a sick deer looks like. I know that deer have been hit by cars, and I know what they look like. But I still don't know what this was. I don't know if anyone has an idea of what it could have been, or maybe have had a similar experience. Thanks. Signed, Holden.
So, that's all the real reports and true cryptid encounter stories that I have to share this evening. So what did you think about these? I'm anxious to read your thoughts and theories down in the comments below, but please keep it respectful to the witnesses. And if you have a strange experience or an unexplained encounter that you want to share, just send it to the email address in the description and, well, your story may just wind up in a future video. Anyways, thanks for joining me on this strange journey. I really appreciate you. And until next time, stay curious, stay vigilant, stay safe, and I'll be seeing you on down the road a ways. Biker out.